It's now my pleasure. I want to thank Dr. Lowry. You are just, it's a wonderful way to start today and to hear all that's happening in Maryland and the hope that this means for the rest of the country. So we really are appreciative of your being here. It's my pleasure now to introduce my colleague, Elizabeth Foster, who's going to lead us through the next part of the program this morning, which is really going to delve into some of the strategies that were in Learning Studios, but really have been playing out in organizations and partner groups throughout the country. So Elizabeth, let me have you join.
Good morning, everyone. Everyone's got their coffee ready to go. As Melinda said, I'm Elizabeth Foster, and I'm here to give you an overview of what is going to happen next today. But first, we are, sort of ridiculously excited that Dr. Lowry has joined us, and I think that her remarks have really set the stage beautifully for what we're going to hear about this morning. So in a few minutes, you'll hear from two panels of experts. First, you will hear from the systems level experts about the strategies that NCTAF believes are critical to facilitating good teaching, professional learning communities, project-based learning, and meaningful work with outside experts. These are the strategies that NCTAF has spent a fair amount of time researching, and these are the strategies that undergird the Learning Studios work. The Learning Studios, as both Melinda and Dr. Lowry have mentioned, are teams of teachers working across content areas and with external experts. So they've worked with folks from NASA and NIH to bring in some external, some real-world workforce data, experiences, and to really work closely with teachers in the design and implementation of their projects. So the Learning Studios have been testing this idea that a purposeful alignment and integration of different strategies would be more effective than a single strategy alone. That a learning team that focused intently on a project-based learning progression would be able to help students more than a learning community without that type of focus. In addition, the STEM professional idea was sort of an interesting addition to a traditional professional learning community or a team of teachers. Those professionals have come in from other industries and really worked closely with the teachers to design their learning experiences, and it's turned out to be really project-based learning for the teachers in some cases, where the teachers have been able to sit together, figure out a particular problem and address that problem by bringing in additional resources. So what you'll hear today is more information about the Learning Studios and the day-to-day work of the teachers. But our goal throughout the day is really to draw connections to the research, to other programs, to other initiatives, and sort of start building, as Melinda said, this momentum towards a collaborative and collective definition of good teaching and the conditions that support good teaching. So the experts on our first panel will take a particular strategy and provide you with an in-depth look at their own research and experience in that strategy. But then they'll also talk specifically about the alignment and integration with other strategies. We'll then learn even more about implementation and support at the district, school, and classroom level with our second panel, where we'll have individuals from school teams, the classroom level, and the district level. These panels will be followed by a presentation by our research partner, Dr. Emmerling, in the back, about how individuals from local communities and industries have contributed to the Learning Studios teaching teams, and how what we've learned from that work can influence the work of others. Now, to really get us started, I'd like to introduce Roberto Rodriguez. Many of you know him, but I'll give you a short bio, and then he can tell you more about himself when he comes up. Roberto serves in the White House Domestic Policy Council as the Deputy Assistant to the President for Education, where he coordinates the administration's education policy initiatives from early learning through college and career training. And based on our conversation earlier this morning, I think he does everything all the time with everyone. So that's basically, I could have just said that, I guess. Earlier in his career, Roberto was the Chief Education Counsel to Senator Edward Kennedy, Chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, which we're all quite familiar with right now. Roberto managed the Democratic education agenda for the committee and led policy development and legislative strategy on, again, everything, all the time, everywhere. Early childhood, higher education, adult education, research and policy development, and working at the federal, state, and local level. So we are thrilled to have Roberto here today. He'll come up and introduce the other panelists right now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to be here. I want to begin by thanking Nick Taff for hosting this important discussion and recognizing and thanking Melinda George for her leadership here. We're really excited to be, our administration is really excited to be part of this conversation about how we strengthen and support our teachers and advance the practice in our classrooms across the country. We believe it's a critical policy agenda item and important for moving our country forward to really realize all of the goals that we have around a great public education system that benefits all kids and all parents. I also want to recognize and congratulate and thank Dr. Lowry for her leadership in Maryland. It's wonderful to hear of the tremendous progress underway in the state. Our administration is proud to be a small part of that with the Race to the Top funding. And I think Maryland is one of the, among the Race to the Top states, one that is really advancing just a tremendous amount of vision and change and support for teachers and for students. And we're very excited about that work as well. So, you know, we're at this time of tremendous progress, not only in Maryland, but really across the country in our system as we really look at how education can be an engine for moving our economy forward. And, you know, we have had a tremendous amount of work underway in our public education system over the past years. And I just want to recognize where we are in terms of the progress of that system as a backdrop to today's conversation. You know, we are at a place today where our dropout rates are at an all-time low. Our graduation rates as a country are at an all-time high, over 80% for our four-year cohort graduation rates. Student achievement is rising in many communities in many states across the country, and college enrollment is rising. You know, and we're seeing some of the most remarkable gains made for some of our students that are from our most disadvantaged backgrounds, as well as for a number of our African American and Latino students. We're seeing progress made and beginning to realize and advance equity and opportunity in our system. So that's a tremendously encouraging sign. It also is a sign, though, that we have to continue down the path for systemic reform. You know, the president has challenged us to really do more to raise our expectations across our public education system, hold ourselves and our students to the standards that we know are needed for success in today's economy, making sure that we are doing more to bridge and close the data gap that we see in many of our schools and in many of our districts in terms of really being able to collect information and know where our students are and develop a strategy for how to get them ahead. Doing more to make sure that we are taking on an agenda for real progress in some of our lowest performing schools. And of course, making sure that we are doubling down on one of the most important components of systemic reform, which is doing more to attract, to prepare, to develop, and to advance our teachers and our human capital, our principals, as the single most important resource we can give our young people. You know, we're also at a time of tremendous change, and I think Dr. Lowry really described the efforts underway in Maryland. They are I think, reflective of the broader change that we're seeing across the country. We have 48 states and the District of Columbia this fall that are teaching to higher college and career ready standards than was previously the case. Now, some states are further along, and some districts are further into that process than others, but undoubtedly, we have our teachers teaching and our students learning to higher expectations today. We have new assessments that are underway that are being adopted in states across the country, and through our administration's ESEA waiver process and program, we have over 40 states that are forging new accountability systems to differentiate and provide support to learners across their state and to recalibrate their systems to a new goal of college and career readiness. So, as we see that change underway, it also reminds us that we have to, in order to really enable every one of our young people to reach those higher expectations, we really need to rethink the learning experience for our students. And we need to challenge ourselves to do more to really recognize the imperative, which is that our educational experience demands a different approach than it did a generation ago. We have still too many of our young people who are not meaningfully engaged or motivated in their academic experience, while many of our other international competitors endeavor to offer a rigorous and a relevant education to their students. So we have to do more, essentially, to engage, prepare, inspire our students to develop the deep knowledge and the skills that they'll need to be successful. And that requires adopting new designs and new approaches to learning, better connections between the classroom and the application of knowledge, new opportunities for collaboration for our students and for our teachers. We are endeavoring as a policy community and as an administration to try to do more to challenge and embrace vision for redesigning our high schools to better calibrate to some of these principles. We're trying to do more to connect our schools to high-speed broadband and high-speed internet so that we can better personalize learning and provide opportunities for individualized teaching and learning, and trying to do more to make sure that we're re-envisioning our career and technical education system and making sure that we're putting career alongside college as important aspirations and engaging our young people early in a vision about their future. But at the heart of all of this is the integral role that our teachers play in our students' success. And we're committed to attracting, retaining, supporting, developing a world-class teaching workforce. The time to act is now. We know that we have to embrace a new vision for teaching and learning. In this decade alone, 1.6 million teachers will retire. 1.6 million new teachers will take their place. If we move forward successfully, the passion that teachers bring to their classrooms will directly relate to the advancement of their students and of our society as a whole. So over the next hour, I'm really proud to be leading and facilitating a conversation here with three outstanding experts who will discuss some systemic levers to promoting collaboration and transformation of our profession around these three principles that you heard about this morning, around how we do more to advance our professional learning communities in our schools, what we can do to provide greater opportunities for project-based learning for our students, and how we can really build bridges of collaboration with outside experts to enrich and support teaching and learning in our classrooms. So I would love to bring up with me now the three panelists that I will introduce briefly to lead our discussion in that effort. And let me first invite Renee Islas to join us. Renee is Senior Vice President of Research, Development, and Demonstration at Learning Forward. And Renee leads the consulting division of Learning Forward. He also developed the Pathway to Achievement, which is a successful school improvement framework that is currently being implemented in K-12 systems across our country. Prior to joining Learning Forward, Rene was Senior Vice President of an international consulting firm where he launched their K-12 education practice. His past experience includes time in government, where he and I first met, and he served as Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary of Education in 2005 and 2006, and played a really pivotal role in forging some of the important programs, discretionary programs focused on teachers under the Bush administration, including the Teacher Incentive Fund and the School Improvement Grant Program. So welcome, Rene. Thank you for joining us. Second, I would like to welcome Alan Veach, who's the Director of Regional Development at the New Tech Network. Hi, Alan. And as Director of Regional Development, Alan's primary focus is growing and sustaining the New Tech network of schools in Ohio, in Indiana, in Michigan, here in the district, and also in Arkansas. New Tech works with 167 schools across 23 states to develop and utilize project-based learning as a primary mode of instruction, to build a culture that empowers students, and to support those students with one-to-one technology that will enhance their learning. New Tech also supports school district leaders in developing partnerships with business leaders to impact project development and lead to real-world connections for students. Alan was the founding principal of Bloomington New Tech in Bloomington, Indiana, and he also has worked as an assistant principal, guidance counselor, and science teacher at large in many of our suburban and urban high schools. And then finally, I'd like to welcome up to the stage Dr. Donna Morrell, who's a director of Encore Fellowships at ESC of New England. Welcome, Donna. Dr. Morrell brings over 25 years of experience in executive leadership and program development in her role as director of Encore Fellowships at ESC. In her primary career at PK-12 education, she was a classroom teacher, a school principal, a curriculum leader, and a superintendent of schools. And she achieved recognition through an outstanding program that we have here at the federal level called the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics Teaching. During her tenure, she was also the first female superintendent in Cumberland, Rhode Island, where she developed a student-centered decision-making framework characterized as 100% of the students, 100% of the time. So we welcome Donna and welcome Rene and Alan. Let's give them a round of applause. So we're going to begin our discussion here, and I'm going to just begin with some brief time here with our panelists and ask them to share with us some of the strategies and approaches that they have used to support the three principles that we discussed here earlier. Professional learning communities, project-based learning, and teaming and working with outside experts. How have you really fostered collaboration through those principles? And share with us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of the results that you've seen as a product of that work. And we'll start with Rene.
Thank you, Roberto, and thanks, Nick Taff and Dr. Lowry. Just wanted to start out by introducing you to Learning Forward, or reintroducing you to Learning Forward. Many of you knew us under a previous name called National Staff Development Council. Does that sound familiar?
Sure does.
Been around for 40 years, working on one thing. And that one thing we sharpened into a new motto that I'd like all of you to repeat as well. That new motto is better teaching every day. Can you say it? Better teaching.
Better teaching
every day. That's a very clear, succinct way of telling what we are about. We're not about new teachers or bringing hiring practices or those kinds of things. We're about how do you improve teaching in schools on a daily basis so that students can achieve, so that schools get better every single day. And we do this in a couple different ways. The first is by supporting our members. We support our members who are those frontline professional developers out in the field who are looking for research-based practices to improve adult learning and ultimately improve practice and student learning. We support educators in the field in general to build systems of professional learning. And then finally, we publish cutting-edge resources based on research that are really practical tools for implementing effective professional learning. My boss hates it when I say this, but we are a professional learning organization that does not offer professional development. We build systems. And so we focus our effort at the state and at the district level to make sure that these collaborative systems are in place where teachers can work together to improve their teaching every day. So I wanted to start a little bit about our knowledge that we've gleaned over the 40 years about professional development. Many of you are familiar with it. You know professional development, or at least the past information about professional development in kind of these categories or stages of different learning experiences. The first is demonstration or exposure to theory. When it comes to the Common Core, we often go in front of teachers and say, these are the new standards. Put them up on a slide deck, about 100 slides for all of those standards, and say, okay, learn them. That only gets about 5% of likelihood of a teacher understanding what was in that 100-page slide deck and turning it into changes in their practice. 5%. Then there's the opportunity to actually see those standards in action through demonstration. That increases it to maybe about 10% of the likelihood of transferring that new knowledge into practice. Then we have allowed teachers to practice that information. Again, that increases it, increases the likelihood of implementation to some level, but not dramatically. And then feedback. Feedback gets you about 40% of a chance that a teacher gets that new knowledge and turns it into practice. If we are able to add all of those things up, theory, demonstration, practice, feedback, and then layer on top of that coaching, we can get to 90% of a likelihood that a teacher will accept that new information and put it into practice in a consistent way in their teaching. Now, all of those different things that I mentioned cannot be done in isolation, but often are, and we call it professional development. That's why we at Learning Forward are really focused on making sure that we create structures and systems and put those in place where a teacher, all teachers in a school, can experience all 5 of those stages of learning together so that we can get to more than 10%, more than 5%, more than 40%, but really a high likelihood, 90% of teachers taking new information, new knowledge, things like the Common Core, things like effective practice, and putting them into practice in a sustained way. PLCs, this is PLC, the way we think of it. If you put those 5 things into place, one of the most efficient ways to do that is through professional learning communities. But we have a fear at Learning Forward. The fear is that PLC has become a commonplace term across the United States. And we know when things become, the stated norm, they no longer are that pure form that we all think about. That pure form we want to put back into place is to make sure that all of us, all of you, emphasize the L in PLC, and that L is learning. We want to make sure that learning becomes intentional, that it's not just any longer professionals meeting together, drinking coffee, and being collegial. We want them learning and changing their practice and implementing those things through those 5 different stages of learning that I mentioned before. And more importantly, I want to say that PLCs, when done right, can actually efficiently, cost-effectively make sure that teachers get exposure to those 5 stages of learning. I want to mention a couple of the barriers that exist to effective PLCs. The first and most common thing that we hear is time. You heard it up on the PISA and OECD TALIS report, that time in the United States for doing things other than instructing students is really small in comparison to the highest performing countries. We need more teachers learning together, coaching each other, giving each other feedback, so that their students, the time that they spend with their students, actually becomes more impactful and effective. The other things are things like willpower, our command and control, thinking that we can just move on to schools and say, implement this, teachers. That doesn't work without those other supports that exist. And then finally, the culture of isolation that is both structural in our schools. We talk about that egg cart notion in our schools and how they're structured. That reinforces this culture where I, as a teacher, will stand by myself and do better myself for my students. That is the reason why in our motto, better teaching every day, we don't say better teachers, we say better teaching, so that there's a collective growth in the quality of teaching. Finally, I want to just quickly run through, as Roberto mentioned, what are some of the things that need to happen in order for effective PLCs to happen. The first is continuous improvement. We need to establish a culture of continuous improvement where there's data, shared goals, implementation, and evaluation happening in schools by teachers every day. The second is collective responsibility. We want to make sure that we shift from just an individual teacher or an individual classroom to all teachers within the school taking responsibility for each of the students in their charge. We need to have healthy, peer-based accountability. It's no longer just that command and control, but we need to empower educators to hold each other accountable for improving every day. We know that principals are in charge and responsible for many teachers, many schools, many parents, in order to be able to diffuse that responsibility in a way that you actually get healthy coaching and feedback. We need to put teachers back in charge of supporting each other. We want to empower them. We want to also accept experimentation within our schools. I often say that our schools now require both the professionals and the students to become hackers. They need to create within their system. They need to figure out how pieces fit together and put them together so that students learn and that teachers improve every day. And then finally, alignment and accountability. Dr. Lowry mentioned that she set a very clear vision at the top in Maryland. And now all of the educators are from the district superintendents all the way down to the classroom teachers know what their target is and are working together in order to get there. And finally, I just want to say that PLCs are really project-based learning for teachers, right? And so all of these things, all of these strategies, getting external support from experts outside of your classroom are things that you put together in an effective PLC to make sure that students improve, but from our perspective, that we have better teaching every day. So thank you for this time.
Great. Thank you, Renee. All right, Alan, let's hear from you.
Great, thank you. Again, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. And, you know, I think what was surprising to me most, maybe not surprising, is that Melinda and her team, when we were talking on the phone and kind of midway through the conversation, just realized that we have the exact same beliefs, that when we think of creating a learning studio in a classroom, that's what as an organization we believe and hold so strongly is what makes a good education for a student, for a learner. And so for us, New Tech Network, we were founded in 1996, really out of a workforce development need in Napa, California. A group of businessmen came together and said, we're getting students who graduate with content knowledge, but they lack the skills, they lack the work ethic, they lack the communication that we need for them to be effective employees or to be effective when they go on to career and college ready. And so from that conversation, the first school was started, and that school is still up and going today in Napa and is being very successful. And so from there, we've moved to 167 schools nationwide. Those schools run the gamut from here in Washington, D.C. at H.D. Woodson, where we have a small learning community that's just a baby school that started this year, to rural Cross County, Arkansas, where we have a school that has just less than 100 students per grade level, and they've committed their entire school to thinking about how do we do education differently. And so for us, at the heart of what we do, we're a school development organization, and we work with school districts or charter organizations to totally reimagine an entire school or a part of a school. And so as we've been a little bit talking here, so for us it's more than project-based learning, that if you really want to see school change, you've got to bundle buckets of change together in order to get to impact. That you can bundle project-based learning in a classroom and you're going to impact some kids, but to impact all kids, you need to change an entire school. And so for us, when we work with districts, it's not about just doing project-based learning, but it's about doing project-based learning in an environment that is very much business-like, that involves kids collaborating very closely around core content areas that have this heavy infusion of what is real in their community in this local context. And it's about creating an environment where not only the kids are working really closely together, but you're talking about the adults are working really closely together well, that we're breaking down walls from classrooms, literally breaking down walls. We want our schools to create integrated classrooms where we have 2 teachers from core content areas, or even being more creative. We have schools in Cleveland that pair biology and art in the same classroom. And it's not that you have a biology teacher and an art teacher teaching like this, but that you have a biology and an art teacher teaching like this. That they lay their standards side by side and say, how can we make biology and art real to these kids? And how can we do that in the local context of our community? And so in Cleveland, at New Tech West in Cleveland, they're partnering with a local organization around helping clean up the riverfront, or not the river, excuse me, the lakefront. And what are those pollutants in that lakefront? And what's the volume of pollutants in our lakefront? And students then will work together in a collaborative group, and they'll make a presentation, not to their peers or to their teachers, but they'll make a presentation to this organization about recommendations for cleaning up the lakefront. So students in our schools are engaged in real-world project-based learning, where they not only work with teachers but community members. And I think that makes, as we were talking earlier, that makes the learning so much more real for kids, because teachers don't have to ask or answer the question why. And so for those of us who've been teachers, we've always been in that classroom where students come up to us and say, why do I have to learn about mitochondria? Being a former biology teacher, I remember that one well. Now kids understand the why, because they're not doing the work for their teachers, they're doing the work for an outside agency. So when we work with developing schools, we think of the one leg that our schools stand on is project-based learning. The second piece that we really feel heavily about is this idea of creating a culture where students have choice and voice. Students in the classroom can't be the holders of the knowledge and can't be the ones that make the entire decision if you want students to be engaged. So our schools work to create a culture that we call that is business-like. And you'll see this reflected in the structures of our school. Schools don't have to, and students don't have to learn in a 900 square foot classroom. And they don't have to learn in a classroom where there's always a teacher watching every move that they make. We can allow our teachers to own their own learning through the use of a piece of technology where they can take their group and they can go to an unstructured space and they can learn together and research together and even laugh and have fun together, because they're kids and they're going to do that. And then they can bring that knowledge back to that classroom to that teacher and share. And so for us, you can't have students learning in an innovative environment if they're constrained to a box with desks and rows. That if project-based learning has to be done well, you have to give up that control to the kids, and you have to push them to go out and think and be a part of their own. A third part of our kind of belief is that technology is a tremendous tool. And I think that all of us that have been in education have experienced a technology rollout where teachers walk into the classroom and suddenly find a room full of 32 kids with iPads that, no matter how hard we try, they will get to Facebook, whether we like it or not. The best filter out there can't keep a teenager off of Facebook. It's my belief in that. But through our model of project-based learning is you give kids a piece of technology to use with a purpose, and that you help those teachers and you provide the professional development to those teachers so that they understand that that technology can be their best friend because it takes them out of that role of being the holder of all the knowledge. And we often think of bowling with bumpers. So those of you who have been bowlers and experienced bowling with bumpers, that using technology and project-based learning, you don't just send a group of kids off into the hinterland with Google, but as a teacher, as a facilitator, you provide those bumpers that guide them and guide their learning. And so through our organization, as we work closely with those schools and those school districts, we end up with a school who's heavily infused with project-based learning. We call it wall-to-wall. That when a student walks in the door of one of our schools, they're going to get project-based learning from the moment they walk in the door to the moment that they graduate. That they're going to get a culture where they have a real choice in what they learn, and they have a voice in how they demonstrate what they've learned. And then the third piece is that they're going to have that technology along the way. And so, in thinking about how do you go from a traditional school with desks and rows to a school that looks like this, it doesn't happen overnight. And as we mentioned earlier, it requires a significant amount of professional development. That if you just walk in the door, have a teacher walk into the door of that classroom and expect them to suddenly know how to just begin doing that, or you expect a leader to walk into that school and expect to understand what's it really like to lead a school where students have voice and choice, that we set them up for failure from the start. And so that in order to get there, we believe as teachers, as designers, and principals as designers, but we also believe in providing the scaffolding through a significant amount of professional development that helps them understand what are those steps that you need to take in order to get to that place in the future. And so through our work with teachers and leaders early on, we've got to the place now where we're pretty good at designing schools. And we see kids that graduate from our schools have a significantly higher persistent rate at both 2-year and 4-year colleges than their peers. And they have a higher graduation rate as well. And so thinking about the future for us, what we've also realized that just a school is no longer good enough. That we can go into a district and we're really good at creating a school, but we also understand for that school to be sustainable and to impact more kids in a community that you have to begin thinking about how to change a district. And how do you begin to create this relationship between district and school where they're learning together? And that it's not a school PLC where teachers are working together and talking about work, but it's also a district PLC where superintendents and principals and assistant superintendents are sitting down at a table and not just sharing information, but what we would like to see them do is actually looking at student work. We're a firm believer that if you're going to do a PLC, you should be looking at the student work that your kids are doing. Because how do you know if kids are graduating college ready unless you're looking at the work they're doing as a staff? And so the next iteration for us as we continue to grow is to go from just developing schools to think about developing districts that are thinking about all these things, project-based learning, student voice and choice, and technology in a really coherent way with their staff. And so we're excited about that. I think we've got a lot to learn as an organization about that, but we do think that if we get to our goal, which is 100% of kids graduating career and college ready, we know that it's got to be more than one school at a time because there's too many schools. But it can be district at a time as we go. So thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Alan. And Donna.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation this morning. Melinda, it was great to meet you, and also Dr. Lowry, to listen to your comments this morning. I really feel like I'm in the right place, and appreciate the invitation to try to connect some of my background as an education practitioner with some of the work that I do now as an Encore careerist, and to hear the idea of experts in the field working with education as the place that an Encore careerist might connect is a really smart choice. Actually, I was thinking about the bio when you talked about it, and it probably could have just used one word to introduce me as terms of what I do right now, and that's I'm a matchmaker. And when you just use the word relationships, that's what I do in my work right now. I think about the relationship between people who have been in a primary career and think about the expertise that they have, and I try to match them with the culture and the need in an organization where they're going to try to work, either in a paid or an unpaid situation. And in this instance, we're trying to think about the education sector. So I want to try to propose this morning that those work sites could be classrooms, schools, at the district level or at the state level, because we support learning at all of those levels. And having been in all of those levels myself, because I was both a kindergarten teacher and I worked all the way through the superintendency, I think there's a place to support good teaching across all of those places. And I'm hoping that when you leave this morning, that perhaps some of my remarks can help you understand how people who are looking for Encore careers bring that outside expertise to, or want to bring that outside expertise to education through their first careers and their training. And I want you to understand what some of the current research is around the availability of Encore careers. And I'd like to propose some theory of action and some general operating principles on how to approach that. So first of all, just to have a common definition of what someone is who is seeking an Encore career, it's generally someone who wants work in their midlife or mid-career with a social impact. And that can be across all kinds of areas. It could be human services, it could be any nonprofit organization that has a social impact mission, and in this instance, we're talking about education. And the social impact, obviously, is the learning improvement for students who have both gaps in their learning and the general idea of improving education overall and measuring that, because the idea of having metrics to measure that is really important. The research comes out of an organization that I'm associated with, which is Encore.org. And if you want to leave here today and do any further research about where the pool of Encore careerists is, I would encourage you to do that. There are two paths to an Encore career, and one is really anyone who has had a primary career and they want to go on to a second or third career. And then there's this national organization called Encore.org that actually advocates the concept of an Encore career. And recently they did a study, they do it every 3 years, and there's several points that I think are important to know. And so if you're thinking, well, are there people out there that are interested in doing this? There actually have been measured that there are 21 million individuals that are seeking Encore careers. So the pool of support is really, really deep. And there are 4.5 million people that self-identify as actually being in Encore careers right now. And I think that's incredibly substantial. Also, since the study was done in 2011, the percentage of individuals who see themselves in Encore careers has grown by 17%. So as a resource for supporting education, this is on a positive trajectory in terms of whether or not there are outside experts who want to support education. The statistics of people who actually say, yes, education is the arena that I want to work, is about 6% of that total. So the current number that would say that I'm working in an Encore career of that 4.5 million is 6% in education. People who say I'm impacting multiple generations in my Encore career is about 62%. That could obviously cross over into education. The number that say I'm working with adults is about 15%, and I know I was talking to someone here this morning that's related to the Encore organization that has a background that is in that arena. Young adults, which it's interesting how people identify themselves, would be about 4%. And then, of course, we have other kinds of organizations that make up the balance of that. And in terms of the personal motivation for individuals, it's sometimes financial, it's sometimes around the purpose and need in the organizations. And so listening to what my colleagues have talked about, the idea of having the professional learning community or the structure that you have with the actual schools, I think that's really important because some individuals are drawn to the structure themselves in terms of the kind of work that they want to do. Most of these individuals that are looking for an Encore career, that have the level of expertise that are going to support education, want to think about ways that they know that their impact can be measured. And they also want to think about the fact that they're going to be valued. And so thinking about the attributes that you talked about in a professional learning community, being part of that collaborative system can often be one of the motivators for someone in an Encore career, and a way to actually bring their expertise to the education system. So I'd like to propose a couple of operating principles from my own experience in terms of how to bring the Encore careerists and outside experts to this work. And I just want to say that I found it interesting that some of the things that you have already brought up this morning are the exact strategies that I was going to propose. So first of all, the idea is to stay focused on learner needs. And the idea of focusing around students as opposed to adult needs, which can be controversial, obviously, in our system in terms of what we develop our structures around. But the idea of developing a theory of action around the needs of the students is, to me, the first most important reason that we think about Encore careerists. I mean, we bring adults into the system for very many reasons, but to address student needs is the most important reason. So if we build the system of supports that we need around identifying student needs, then Encore careerists are a logical solution because they have the expertise that we need. And so you can think of a range of issues. At the classroom level, it could be as a data analyst. In the PLC, you talked about looking at student work. Sometimes when you're looking at student work, the idea is to actually develop that skill for teachers so there can be a transfer of knowledge there. At the district level, it could be to help build human capital systems. We have outside experts that have the HR knowledge that, in fact, our own internal individuals may not be lacking, but could certainly develop in a stronger way and address the gaps that might exist. And also, we may look at short-term assignments that individuals might be interested in filling. Another principle that I think leads from that is the idea of identifying exemplars. So the idea of an outside expert coming from Encore careers probably exists right now in your school systems and across classrooms and districts. And if you are intentional about wanting to bring these kinds of experts and grow the pool of experts, then I would suggest if you create a narrative that identifies them and talks about where these success stories are, then it will lead to additional people being drawn to want to do this kind of work. Without connecting the dots in that way, then it's unlikely that you'll be able to increase the pool as rapidly. And I do think that Encore careerists are a really strong method for accelerating resources in the district. And then lastly, I think that leads to the idea of creating clear, structured assignments and opportunities. And to do that, I think that you have to have selection criteria, and I think you have to have very well-defined outcomes, which obviously relate to the measures of student achievement, but can often be qualitative instead of quantitative. And those three things married together, I think, design a nice plan for thinking about how outside experts in the form of Encore careerists can be supporting the strategies that we're talking about this morning and supporting student learning improvements.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Wonderful. What a great conversation, and I love how all of you really, the thread across all of your comments is the spirit of collaboration and how we can try to do more to promote collaboration within our professional workforce as well as for our students and our learners to be more effective and to be more successful. So we want to spend some time hearing from the audience in terms of your questions for the panelists. So please prepare those and give some thought to the questions you'd like to delve deeper in the short time that we have left. I want to, I think there are a few themes that have, for me, were really salient in your remarks. The first is the theme of this need for a systemic approach. It's not just one strategy or one principle that any of you are employing to be successful. It's really thinking about a very systemic way to address this. And it's an exciting notion. I think all of you have described an environment for professional collaboration and support, and an environment for learners that is still a departure from our status quo in most of our schools, right? I think it's a wonderful vision for change. And I'm intrigued by the process by which I think we could spend a lot of time really in a conversation about how you've really supported change at the local level, how you get principals and teachers and students to embrace a vision of something different than what they've been doing in the past. And certainly you all have wonderful examples. I think the examples that Encore has developed and disseminated around adjunct teachers, around coaches for students and for teachers is some great school-based examples. The president visited Maine or New Tech down in Austin, Texas, and was really excited about the approaches there. And the professional learning communities, Renee, that Learning Forward has done and developed in some of our districts is really exciting. So my question here, just to kick us off, is around scale. We have these various examples of wonderful work. Share with us, maybe, and this is for any of you, one opportunity or one challenge that can be addressed to really do more to bring the approaches that you spoke about to scale at a larger scale. I mean, this is something that we wrestle with as a policy community here in DC all the time, is how do we engender that change across the country? Any thoughts?
I'm just going to start out with the example from Maryland. I mean, bringing the work to scale, bringing the Common Core in your case, but the culture shift that it takes for everybody to work together on this common problem, it takes setting a common problem first. And so states like Maryland that established that common vision, states like Kentucky that started out with a common problem but then set a policy framework that they established to support teachers working together are ways to get that scale. So I think the very first most important thing, and the thing that the White House and states are moving forward on, is setting that common vision for what we expect of children with these new standards.
That's great. Thanks, Renee. Alan or Donna?
Yeah, I would just add to that and think about kind of from our perspective. One of the things I think a way to get to scale is to have a model, somewhat like we do, so that you're not a district or school trying to create everything from scratch. So you already have a collaborative group of individuals that you can go to rely on. But I also think, as I mentioned, that the piece of that is the next level is building that internal capacity, and so that it's districts owning this, and so that professional development targeted at that district level so that they can then begin developing their own schools. So we go from a school development organization to thinking about teaching districts to become school development organizations so that they can impact all schools within a district K-12.
District culture. Great. Thank you, Donna.
Well, I think it connects to Alan's comment, which is the idea of exemplars. And where there's an idea in a district or an intention, if someone were to leave here today and think, well, I'd like to explore the idea of an outside expert, or I'd like to explore the idea of an Encore careerist supporting the learning improvements in my school or classroom, where do I begin? So if there are exemplars that I can look to, then I have a starting point.
Good, thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead to the audience and would love to hear your thoughts, your questions for the panelists here. And looking to the microphone. We'll start with Reggie.
Hey,
How are you?
Hi, Reggie Felton, National School Boards Association. Thanks again for sharing the dreams and the innovations. And certainly as school boards from our real world, there are many political and financial fights to bring about the kind of changes you're talking about. Can you share with us some of the, let's just call them some of the roadblocks that you've identified and how you dealt with them? And secondly, can you share with us your funding sources in terms of what makes you continue to operate?
Okay. Let me talk about professional learning communities and what school districts have done that are successful exemplars for the country. I think I'm going to go back to Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, both at the state school board level as well as the local school boards, have really created their own professional learning communities in concert with the practitioners at the school level. So they're working together to identify their issue of creating more time in schools and creating the flexibility for the scheduling. They're working through this issue collaboratively. So it's not just the school board deciding that we're going to create or establish planning time for schools. It's actually sitting down together and planning this with the practitioners in the classroom. There's different governance models and having to worry about that, but it's what we found is when they work together, the school board members with the teachers themselves and the parents, that you can actually establish these relationships where things like time and money don't become the issue anymore. And it's because of refocusing their priorities on making sure that learning is happening for adults and students. When that shift in response or in focus occurs, the sky's the limit on what you can change structurally to make it happen. And so I would, don't have a lot of time to go into how Kentucky did it, but I would encourage all of you to look at Kentucky as an exemplar that scaled things from the state level to the federal or to the district level and down to the school level by having collaborative communities between the positions of authority like the school board, the superintendent, all the way down to the classroom.
Great, thank you, Renee. Others on that particular question?
I think we talked a little bit beforehand, and I think any time that you incorporate a significant change within a school, you have parents who look at that and say, that's really different than the way I learned. And those same parents go to their school board members and say, that's really different than the way that I learned. And so what we've learned along the way is you have to involve school board members and parents early on. That change can't happen in isolation, that if you're expecting teachers to teach through project-based learning, which is a significant shift for most teachers, that you have to educate your community from the minute you begin having that conversation so that you go on that journey together and it's not seen as a school doing something drastically different, but the community recognizing that need to do that for their students.
Great. Let's take another question for our panel.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Norby from the Smithsonian, and my question is, what is the role of technology in building professional learning communities around doing project work that include experts? And if you have any exemplars of where you think technology has been used particularly well to accomplish that?
I think technology is opening up a lot of opportunity when it comes to professional development. You can accelerate the process. I talked about those 5 different learning models that exist, from demonstration to exposure to theory, which are all critical. A lot of that can happen without being constrained with location, time, space, all of those things. And so we're seeing new models where different providers are putting up those demonstrations in a video-based format that teachers watch on their own time, create their own engagement with that tool, and then come back to the team to process that feedback, that coaching. So it's an infusion of new knowledge that I think, and access to knowledge that technology is really facilitating. But it's also, I think, on a cultural side, breaking down the barriers of teachers working individually by themselves. Through technology and allowing teachers to connect with people and experts beyond the borders of their school is just changing the culture dramatically. And so to see teachers working together in New England to the West Coast, it's amazing to see that kind of interaction that technology is facilitating.
And I would say yes. And I would add, for us, it's also been a big issue that we realized around equity of access, that districts that have funding to send staff to professional development across the U.S., and we have districts that there's no way that they could send their staff. And so as an organization, we look back at that as, so how can we make that space, time, money no longer an issue, and getting teachers access to that rich professional development and an opportunity to collaborate. And for us, technology is that answer.
Terrific. Thank you.
One comment I would make is I represent an aspect of Encore Careerists that is a program called Encore Fellowships. And it's a very specific pathway to an Encore career. So what we're seeing is individuals who may come out of the high-tech industry, and they're looking to transition their skills into roles that would, for example, be invaluable to an organization like the Smithsonian at various levels, as well as in roles in schools, data analysis, building technology systems, and supporting classrooms and so forth. They have really deep functional technical expertise around the use of technology, and it varies in the types of interests that they have in transitioning to an Encore career.
Great. We have maybe time for one more question. Can we go to one more question? Yes, you in the back.
Hi, Raj Boya, IT consultant and instructor. Collaboration seems to be the theme this morning. I have 2 questions. One is, given the unemployment situation, especially for 4-year college grads, what kind of collaborative effort do you think needs to be there between colleges and businesses to improve their job opportunities? And the second question is student debt. Based on my conversations with some students, they were like, well, had I known then this is where I would be, I probably would not have pursued a 4-year college degree. $60,000, $150,000 debt. So are there any efforts to teach high school students basic money management techniques and basic finance so that probably they don't get into this kind of student debt, which is really burdensome?
Both great questions. We know student debt is on the rise across the country. I think in particular this question around collaboration with employers and with post-secondary education. Any reflections from our panel on that?
Well, I think that one of the things that we think about when we think career and college ready, so for us, we've broken down that to aware, eligible, and prepared. And that when students are in a school, many of them will have few if any models of what does it mean to be a professional. So I grew up in a very rural community. For me, a professional was a teacher. I didn't see professionals other places, and we have other examples of that. And so when you think of career and college ready, it's more than just the academics, but exposing students to careers early on and what it takes to be that career. So for us, college ready, we want every one of our students to graduate with the opportunity to go to a four-year college. That doesn't mean that's the right choice for every student. And so how do you bridge that gap, or how do you make students aware of that debt? Is early on begin that process of opening the options up for them, exposing them to professionals, exposing them to careers, so that when they get to that choice, they can make the choice that's right to them, not only that's right for them, and they understand what it takes to get there.
Great. Thank you, Alan. And now let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you. I think a very exciting vision for increasing the capacity for our teaching workforce and supporting collaboration as a means to enhance teaching and learning. So thank you, all three of you, very much. I'm going to go ahead and turn the program back over to Elizabeth. Thank you.